Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Canceled Podcast. We will be talking about things that society tries to tell you that you'll be canceled for, or talk about things in the past where people were, kind of inappropriate to today's standards that they probably couldn't do again today. We'll also be talking a little bit about Cyan's background and her growing up, and pretty much touching everything current events and whatever we feel like talking about, pretty much. And if you're not all that familiar with Cyan, well, you're going to have an opportunity to get to know her. She's one of the most amazing people that you'll ever meet. Super smart and creative in the way that she sees the world. And I'm just a duck call maker from Arkansas. So you'll get to know a little bit about me too. I hope you enjoy the new episode, and let's get rolling.
Business. Big man and witness my musical litmus. Just for your fitness. Beg my forgiveness, my records go Guinness, so be my apprentice. Unicorn hacking and vanish. Angel investors, my internet tennis. Still criminal till I spill it to finish. Survival the fittest, a digital menace. I'm still in idle the scene. Popping them volumes and sipping caffeine. Marshall web packets in a subroutine that I write to a stream with a proxy between. Embedded writings and word. Macros disabled, your boy ain't deterred. Wire transferred, social the teller and teller you heard about the king nerd. I keep it suave on the phone. Shut off utilities, black out your home. Cracking the wireless back with a drone. Keep the Mac clone, D off the zone. Swat your whole crew with a spook. Cops have no need for the truth.
Welcome to Story Time with Cyan, where I tell stories about my life, and Lee asks me questions that hopefully prompt me towards more storytelling.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lee, just introduced by Cyan. So this is a podcast that you've been wanting to do. So to talk about some of your life, or as you call it, blah.
Yeah.
Business, life, art, and humor.
Yeah, that started out as many of my projects do, an idea that I had to do a mailing list, and I sent one message on that mailing list and have not written since. So hopefully this podcast will have many more episodes and be way more successful than my mailing list was.
And were you trying to start like a Medium mailing list or a Medium article writing session that you were doing?
Kind of. I think the service was called Review, and basically you subscribe to a mailing list, and then I was supposed to send things out daily or weekly, and it was, best made plans. Life got really busy after that, and then I wasn't able to do it. That's why I'm excited about a podcast, because it's much easier for me to come in and just tell a story and, talk with you than it is for me to sit down and try to, figure out how a story should be laid out. And you're also very self-conscious when you're writing. And so I'm less likely to be successful, I think, if I try to do that. And this way, I think, especially with you reminding me that I have to do it, then I'm more likely to succeed.
So when you're writing, do you feel that there is just can't be yourself, or you're overly critical?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a professional writer, and so I've read all the books on the tricks of the trade for how to write better, but as I'm writing, I'm also editing myself, and it's just not. And also just, I don't really like talking about myself. It's funny because I'm doing a whole podcast right now. I'm telling stories about my life, and I'm doing it mostly because when I tell stories, people are like, oh my gosh, you've got to write a book, or you've got to get this out to more people. And, I love telling stories, but, I really don't like talking about myself that much.
Well, you're in the right place, because we're going to be talking about nothing but you.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
So you've, in San Francisco, of course, made a name for yourself through your business and through just even your personality, like hosting a Build-A-Bear party out of nowhere.
Yeah. I'm really excited about this Build-A-Bear party. I hope that they let us do it. We'll see.
I just have to get a date nailed down. So they seem to be pretty receptive for actually renting out like some of the stuff. So I'm still trying to work on it.
Yeah, if you're wondering what the Build-A-Bear party is all about, is I'm really, really crazy about Baby Yoda. from this TV show called The Mandalorian. I don't know. Can you call it a TV show? Am I dating myself? An episode of.
I think technically it's still a TV show. They're
Okay,
just
TV.
distributing differently.
It's a show. Okay.
It's a streaming show.
It's one of my favorite streaming shows on Disney Plus, and I'm obsessed with Baby Yoda. But anyway, on Twitter, it popped up in my timeline that Build-A-Bear was going to be the first company to have a Baby Yoda plushie, and I just lit up because I was like, oh my gosh, they host birthday parties at Build-A-Bear. And so I was like, well, maybe if I go and I reserve like every spot in March, every day for a Build-A-Bear party, I will eventually be able to land the Build-A-Bear party for Baby O. And anyway, we're working on it. We're trying to work with Build-A-Bear, the corporation, to have a time slot where people can come and build Baby Yoda with us, because we should all have Baby Yodas.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? It just makes the world better.
Yeah, right? Those big eyes looking up at you. Oh, it'll be so great.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious what they're going to do, because in Build-A-Bear you can customize what your project or whatever you're building looks like. So
yeah, you can put Baby Yoda in a jersey, and if you're sporty, you could put Baby Yoda in I don't know. Like a rainbow onesie with a tutu.
Yeah, so I was wondering, are they just going to use the regular stuff that they have for bear or plushies, or are they going to have their own little line of extra Baby Yoda clothes?
Probably a little bit of both,
or a Baby Yoda hat.
Yeah, because even Transformers, they had Build-A-Bear Transformers, and you could do stuff with them, and you could put them in roller skates. So. Does Baby Yoda have feet? Obviously, Baby Yoda has feet.
He does.
I haven't seen them, though.
I think there were a couple scenes to where he was sitting on the ground, with his little footsie sticking out under his little robe.
We've seen his little hands, but not his little feet. Okay. He or she. We don't even know if it's a she.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering, what Baby Yoda is. Is it a reincarnation of, how Professor Xavier, after he was destroyed, he used his power to reconstitute himself after his body was destroyed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this what Yoda did? Or did Yoda actually have a baby? Or
I think in the timeline, I could be wrong. You're more of a Star Wars expert than I am. So, and maybe you can tell people later on in another episode of this podcast. But I think that Yoda is alive in the timeline where Baby Yoda exists. I think. So if that's the case, then maybe it's Yoda and Yaddle's baby. I didn't know there was a Yaddle. I just found out that Yaddle exists.
I'm thinking that this Mandalorian timeline is actually after the current films.
Really?
So yeah, Yoda would be dead. Because he turned into a ghost.
Oh, well then maybe your theory is right. For some reason I thought this took place I don't know. I thought it was in canon it was somewhere in between. The Last Jedi, and I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think this is after all of the Imperial stuff fell, right? So I'm thinking that now I'm questioning myself. Is it after
Let's find out.
Jedi, or
let's find out, and then we'll save this. Stick a pin in it.
Okay.
We'll do our research and try to figure out where
more Baby Yoda.
Where Baby Yoda comes from.
well, talking about where Baby Yoda comes from, where do you come from?
Where does baby Cyan come from? I was born in Tucson, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents were both college kids at the University of Arizona. And both were artists. One of them still is an artist. And we lived, they lived right off campus in a Quonset hut. Mm-hmm. And so I was born at the hospital, and then my first, I don't remember this Quonset hut, but I've heard plenty about it. My dad took me one time to go see where the Quonset hut used to be, but it doesn't exist anymore, sadly. So
because Quonset huts are those military structures that can be moved around or deconstructed and reconstructed somewhere else, right?
Yeah, they're like corrugated steel pipes cut in half.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of looks like you just literally took a gigantic pipe, and cut it in half and laid it on the ground, and you're living in it. Um,
It's
I think
just
they're
like
pretty crafty.
Just you like take slices of it and then stack it into arches. And then like put an end on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
If you like take a road trip across America, which I know people don't really do that much anymore, but if you do, you will see plenty on the side of the road. It's something that's not really a coastal city, sort of building.
Oh wait, so people live in the middle of the country?
Yeah, they
Is that
do.
Like
they
in between
do.
the coasts?
Yes, they do. And I highly recommend that people get in their car or a vehicle of some kind and head across America and see it. Because I do think that most people fly wherever they're going, and then they don't remember like everyone else that's down there when they fly over them.
They're trying to get the destination without the journey.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I'm from Arizona. Arizona is very different than San Francisco in so many ways. And so I was born in Tucson, and I was raised in just about every part of Arizona. So the Four Corners area where the not the Grand Canyon, Canyon de Chelly is, and the Navajo Reservation. And then I lived on the Navajo Reservation for quite some time. I also lived in Flagstaff, Arizona, and Phoenix. So
now the Four Corners, that's the northeastern corner, right? Like between New Mexico and Arizona?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I was like 30 minutes away from the New Mexico border.
Okay.
Where Gallup, New Mexico is. I don't know if you know where that's at.
Is that northern? Like
northwestern?
Oh, northwestern.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like right near the border of Arizona.
Oh, okay. So with California?
No.
Oh, wait.
The other way.
Nevada. Oh.
The other side.
Okay.
You're thinking of like Grand Canyon, which is like on the Nevada side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Canyon de Chelly is a littler canyon, smaller canyon, which is over near the New Mexico Four Corners area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's the Apache Reservation? Navajo. So like, I thought, wait, no, isn't Fort Apache over in that area too?
Possibly.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean...
I was thinking there was like a Fort Apache Reservation.
I think the Apache Reservation is further south. I could be wrong about that.
Oh, okay.
But then there's a Hopi Reservation that's in the middle of the Navajo Reservation. There's these mesas, and they have like 4 mesas, I believe. And their reservation is literally an island surrounded by Navajo reservations.
Okay. And that, like, that little Four Corners area is where you mostly grew up in your teens, or...
No, when I was smaller. So my teenage years were mostly in Flagstaff or Phoenix.
Okay.
But my little tiny Cyan, Baby Yoda years.
Baby Yoda.
were in the Four Corners Navajo Reservation area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in San Francisco?
Oh, yeah. So it involves a job and a guy. So basically, I worked at this internet service provider called Extreme Internet, and I used to get these mailings sent, sort of like trade magazines sent to me, and they would tell me all about what was going on in Silicon Valley. And it was so obvious that like whatever was happening that was cool that I wanted to be involved with was in Silicon Valley and not Arizona. So
y'all were doing like the sort of behind the curtain sort of work on the internet stuff in Arizona, and then like the fun action front end stuff was here?
Well, just everything, infrastructure. So the time that I got involved with technology was around the time that I like to call the pipe builders. So we were the generation of people who laid down the infrastructure for what exists today. And so if you think about, a lot of people work at internet service providers, and that's because, that was like the thing. Now everything's in the cloud, and you go to Amazon or Google. It's all been consolidated. But at the time that I got into this, there were still ma and pa hosting providers and internet providers. And then AOL came along and kind of gobbled all of them up. And we couldn't compete with AOL. And so a lot of people just went out of business. But
I was I was always interested in how like GoDaddy got started there in Arizona. Like from being in the middle of the country, I'm like, why would a big company like GoDaddy be like, what is it about Arizona that has all these
We should look into that. I think part of it is,
and they're around Scottsdale, right?
Yeah. They weren't around when I was there. They, I think, just formed around the time that I left. So otherwise, like, I probably would have ended up at GoDaddy. There's not a lot of tech opportunities in Arizona, so most of it was legacy stuff like Intel or Motorola. But GoDaddy would have been exciting, and it just wasn't there. So I think most likely it started there because, and I don't know for sure, but Arizona is like a call center place.
Okay.
And it doesn't have a lot of natural disasters. And so I think that a lot of people put their call center.
Are you saying you don't have to worry about like snow blizzards or anything shutting down your call center?
No snow blizzards.
It's always open.
It's always open. You maybe some dust storms.
Mm-hmm.
That's really about it. Even I had several jobs in call facilities. So like even to this day, when I call someone on the phone, I say, "May I please speak to Lee?" You know, because I spent so much time doing call center work. So if anything, I'm guessing that GoDaddy has a very call center centric business, or support driven business, and it makes sense that they would be in Arizona for that reason. But I don't know for sure.
This is off the track, but talking about phone, I have this weird little thing with the way that I answer phones. I'm thinking it's proper. I'm thinking it is, but I'm from Arkansas, so I don't know. If somebody calls and says, "Can I speak to Cyan?" and you pick up the phone, what do you say?
And it's me.
Mm-hmm.
I say, "This is Cyan."
Okay, so you just use your name.
Yeah.
You don't say like, "This is she."
No.
Okay.
No.
So when I pick up the phone and somebody asks for me, I say, "This is he."
This is he.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure when I was young, I heard that like the proper way to answer a phone, and you're the one answering that the person's calling for, is "This is he, this is she."
Huh. I always say, "This is Cyan."
So you just use your name.
Yeah, this is Cyan.
Yeah, I never do that.
Or sometimes I say speaking. Speaking.
Like you're on it.
Or yes.
Yes, what can I help you with?
Hello. If I answer the phone at all.
Okay.
That's really the issue.
So you've never heard that of like answering the phone as "This is he, this is she"?
No.
Okay.
No, never heard of that.
Maybe it's one of those things that I spent a lot of time around old people. So I was largely raised by people that grew up in the 1920s, 30s. So I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe it's just an old timey thing.
Could be a generational thing. Yes.
Maybe.
But
and I'm stuck in the middle.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time at doing telemarketing, and so it's just kind of part of me now. Yeah, I was one of those annoying people that called you during dinner and bugged you. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world though, because I think that obviously I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for all of the experiences I've had, including being in telemarketing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the internet job that I had, by the way, going back to how I got here, that's how I got here to San Francisco, was eventually I realized I needed to just sort of pack up and come here. And so I just put everything in my car. I had a friend who actually drove my car out here with me.
Did they end up moving too, or did they just go back?
No, they went back.
They just wanted to make sure you got here.
Yeah, they just wanted to deliver me to the guy. Okay. That's part of the story.
The guy. All right. So what about the guy? So you came here for a job or guy.
Yeah, I actually had no job in mind. I was told that basically you could find whatever you wanted in Silicon Valley off of Craigslist. Anything. And so I thought, well, I'll just get here and get a job. And so I came out originally, though, to be with this guy that I had dated and had met in Arizona, who had come out to Silicon Valley for a job. And that was very short-lived. But
so back in the old days, how did you correspond with this guy?
Oh.
So you knew him in Arizona, but were you using like ICQ Messenger or sending letters or like
IRC.
IRC.
Are you familiar with IRC? Internet Relay Chat, I think is what it's called.
No.
So IRC is a network that a lot of actual technology today is kind of based off of. It's like Twitter, except it was more private. So you had these channels you could join, and people would be lingering in those channels, and then you could direct message with people. And it was, for the most part, always on. Sometimes they had, servers that would go down or split off and things like that. But mostly we communicated over IRC, and I also had a two-way pager that I was really into.
which you've recently got back into?
Yeah, I just bought myself another two-way pager. It's not working out so well. Unfortunately, people are not receiving my like messages from my pager. So maybe just, I don't know, there's some challenges with making it work today. But yeah, and then we would call every now and then with the, if I could afford it, it was pretty expensive. So, and I didn't have a cell phone. So, but mostly it was just IRC.
Wasn't that weird how people got by without cell phones? And you just called, and if you missed them, you didn't just assume that they were dead. You were just going to call back in a couple hours, and they would just pick up the phone then. It's
so annoying now because people call you and then they get so mad when you don't answer. They're like, I called you. You didn't answer. I mean, I'm guilty of this too. But
it's like, I'm so worried. I didn't hear from you for like the last couple hours. Anything could have happened to you. So like we've gotten this paranoia like with this constant connection. So now that if it's interrupted, then like something bad happened. It
is strange. Like I remember when pagers first came out, everyone had pagers, and you drive around with a pager, and they were obnoxiously loud. And you would put in a code to let people know that whatever you wanted to talk about was urgent. So you put in your phone number and then put 911 at the end. And I remember when people would abuse 911. And so like I have a very specific person who may or may not be listening, Aaron, who would call me.
And everything was an emergency?
Everything was an emergency. 911, everything. I'd pull off the freeway, go to a payphone, because you had to go to a payphone, and I'd have to find change and call Aaron, and then he'd be like, what's up? I'm like, what's the emergency? I just want to know what you're doing. What are you doing tonight? Like, oh my gosh.
The emergency was trying to hear your voice.
Yeah. Gonna murder you.
Yeah. Or, I don't know. Since we didn't have that sort of constant connectivity, I remember junior high, if you did have a conversation call or like phone call with a friend or a person you're interested in, I guess, was it just me, or would you end up being on the phone with somebody for like 3 hours?
Oh, 3 hours. Yeah. I used to hide in my closet.
And so where you have to like switch phones because one died.
Yeah. I used to hide in my closet and like have really, really long, obnoxiously long phone calls. And to be honest with you, I can't even remember what we talked about.
Yeah. Just nonsense.
Nonsense. Yeah.
And then you had calling cards. Did you use those?
I did later on in life.
Because long distance was a thing still.
Yep.
And it was super expensive for some reason. Because, it's difficult to connect phones.
Well, it's because they had a monopoly on it.
Yeah.
So there wasn't any competition. So they could charge whatever they wanted to charge for the longest time.
And then you're fancy if you had call waiting.
Oh yeah, that was super fancy.
You're like, just a second, I have another call coming in.
Yeah, I'm so important. I have another call.
Let me switch over. I'll be right back.
One of my favorite things to do, this is terrible, but one of my favorite things to do is three-way calls. And so what I would do is call a friend in the middle of the night and then call another friend and then stay silent and patch them together. And it was the best thing to do with brothers and sisters. Because like they're like, you called me. No, you called me.
Or like people that don't want to talk to each other.
Yeah, you just force them to talk to each other. And it was the funniest thing ever. I mean, nobody does that anymore. But it's really funny.
Yeah.
Like you answer the phone and you're like, hello. And they're like, hello. Why'd you call me? I didn't call you. And you just put your phone on mute.
I did similar stuff. It was like, all right, we're going to iron this out. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a bit of a problem with prank calling. I really, really enjoyed prank calling people. And especially my friends. Because the thing is, like, you have nothing else to do. Like, there was TV and a lot of us didn't have the internet for a while. And so what you would do is you just prank call your friends.
Did you ever get into spoofing?
Spoofing phone numbers? Yes.
Yeah, I did that too. That was really fun. It could be really fun or really cruel.
Yeah.
Depending on what number you were spoofing.
Yeah. We used to dial out from a PBX from a high school, and because we had all of these, PBXs that we knew we could dial into that were available to me and my friends, and we would call as a school to other people, so it would show up on their caller ID as a school. It was, fun times.
Sometimes I call people from a police phone number.
Oh no!
We're trying to find blah blah blah.
Yeah, phones were all the rage back in the day.
Or call from somebody's number that, let's say, that they were trying to date or they're interested in, and then like just leave them a message and get them super interested even though the other person didn't call. And so then just try to like provoke that thing to get them to actually call. It's like, no, you called me. It's like, no, I didn't call you.
When I was younger, my mother, she had multiple jobs, and so she wasn't home a lot. And so in order to go, like, her parenting style was every now and then she would call the house to see if I was there. And then if I pick up the phone, then I must be fine. And then hang up, and that was it. And I wouldn't hear from her again until the next day.
You're like, she's there.
Yeah, she's there. She's alive. She's fine. Ping. So what I decided to do is if I would go out with my friends, I would put on the answering machine a disconnected notice. We're sorry. The number you have reached has been disconnected or is no longer in service. Please hang up and try your call again.
And then she'd be like, oh, I guess I forgot the bill.
Yeah, I didn't pay the bill. She must be fine. Whatever.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, and then I remember like she would come home and she'd be like, the darn phone's disconnected again. And I'm like, oh, interesting.
It's like, that's weird. It's on now.
It's on now. I don't know what you're talking about. I was a hell child. Anyway.
That's funny. I don't know. I'm just curious whether kids today could even find that sort of fun, because they seem to have to be preoccupied or like busy all the time or engaged all the time with stuff now.
Well, their thing now is all about sort of like trolling online, and so it's more like, you're in a game and you create a pit and somebody falls into the pit and then everyone laughs. So it's very different. It's more of a, I think video game focused thing now, than like phones and stuff like that. But they have their own culture and their own sort of thing that they're doing. It's just different than ours. Yeah. They don't have to struggle as much.
Do people even take like family trips anymore to where they get in a car and drive to like Florida?
I do. I don't know if everyone else does. I mean, I did see some RVs on the trips that I took, and so I think that people are still keeping that alive to some extent. And I do think that there's a lot of startups right now that have to do with renting RVs and camper vans. That's like a thing. And so I think people are finding it or romanticizing sort of the travel across America or van life. So I do think that people still do it, but not as much as they should do it.
Yeah. Now you have a camper. You got into
I have
campers.
2 of them.
Yeah. So what got you into that? Was it just childhood memories or just a sense of adventure that you're going to go explore somewhere and it's like a road ship? Or
yeah, I think it started with my grandfather. My grandfather had an Airstream, and it was one of the Airstreams you could drive, not the ones that you haul. Eventually, I think he had like a little hauler Airstream called a Bambi. And I seem to remember that he had 2 or 3 Airstreams throughout our life. And interestingly, we never went camping in them. They were always parked out front.
Did he use them for deer hunting or something? Or?
I don't know what he used them for, but they were always immaculate. So like my grandmother would outfit them with curtains and like blankets and
just in case they go on a trip.
Just in case, but they never really went anywhere.
It's going to be the home away from home, so it's going to feel like home.
Yeah. My grandpa was obsessed with beds. Like he had this thing where he wasn't satisfied. And I have my own hang-ups, which we can talk about at some point. Like, my refrigerator always has to be stocked. Well, my grandfather had to have as many beds as possible because somehow all of the family and extended family was going to come stay at any time. And he had to be prepared with as many beds as we could all possibly use. So I think that the Airstream had to do with having a spare bedroom.
Okay.
More than like something you would take out on the road.
So did he just have like mattresses piled up in a storage room or?
No, it was more like he just kept building rooms.
Oh.
So when he retired, he bought this house in Oklahoma, and he built a shed next to it. And the shed it was 2 stories. So on the lower level was his tractor and his tools and his trucks and, like hunting stuff. And on the upper floor, he built 4 bedrooms.
So it was like a loft.
Yeah, it was like a loft, and it had 4 bedrooms and 4 beds. And then the house had, there was their room, my room, a spare bedroom, and then there was a playroom that had all these bunk beds. So he had like 8 bunk beds. I was like, who's going to come here and spend the night? I actually think that there are many, many beds that my grandfather had that no one ever slept in. But he had this thing where he just wanted to provide shelter.
Yeah, my grandparents were the opposite. They're like, oh yeah, well you can stay here, but you're not staying.
Yeah, he's going to sleep on the floor.
It was like, you can stay overnight, whatever, but you're not staying too long.
Yeah, either that or
they didn't want you crashing for a week.
My grandfather had a couple granddaughters and a daughter, so maybe it also was about keeping us separated from boys, because that was another one of his weird things. So when I would come visit with a boyfriend or whatever, visit my grandfather, he would make the guy sleep on the floor or in another bedroom or whatever. We weren't allowed to be in the same bedroom together ever. So he's pretty old fashioned in that way. But I think my RV obsession came a little bit from my granddad. A lot of my obsessions actually come from my grandfather, and I romanticize being on the road and living in this, portable domicile. It kind of just sort of represented freedom.
And just being able to go wherever, whenever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my grandpa, I never talked to him. I really wish I had talked to him about his Airstreams, because I would have liked to have known why he had them, because we never once took a road trip with them.
No, he was an engineer?
Mathematician and teacher.
A teacher, okay.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if...
And an artist. If you called him an artist, he would be like, I am not an artist, but he was an artist. He definitely was. He made pottery and jewelry, and he painted, and he made leatherworks.
Calling him an artist was too beatnik for him?
It was insulting. Yeah, it was just not okay.
I'm not a hippie.
Yeah, I'm not a hippie. Exactly. No, he was if anything, he was a craftsman. He was all about the fact that he could build anything and construct anything and solve any problem. And for him, making pottery was utilitarian. It was we need beer steins. Yeah, that's the other weird thing is he made all these beer steins. My grandfather didn't drink beer. He never once touched beer in his life. But he had all these beer steins.
Just really in case he decided to have an Oktoberfest and then just have everybody over. Everyone had their own stein.
Any given moment, he might need that. He also made a lot of vases. We did use those. And he also had ashtrays. He loved to make ashtrays, but he didn't smoke. So he would, sorry if this offends anyone, but he would kill turtles. Snapping turtles.
They're delicious.
I think he probably ate them too. And then he would dry out the shells and then turn the shells into these really beautiful tortoise ashtrays.
Nice.
I guess snapping turtle ashtrays, not tortoises technically.
Now, when you go to New Orleans, they do have turtle soup. So if you've never had it.
I've had it on accident. Have I told you my turtle soup story?
Oh, that was in China?
In Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
for the energy drink?
Yeah. So I worked in Hong Kong for a short period, a hot moment. And my coworkers in Hong Kong really liked to prank me and try to get me to eat all sorts of local delicacies. and one of them was, I'll just go ahead and tell this story because it's really funny. But one time, it was during a work break, they took me to this cafe, and they said, we want to give you this dessert. It's a specialty here. It's a really expensive thing, and it makes your skin glow, and it makes you look young forever. Amazing stuff. You gotta try it.
If a pretty Chinese lady is telling you that, it's true, because they never age.
Yeah. Well, apparently this is the secret.
Yeah.
Or some people's secret anyway. But so they ordered me this dish, and it came out, and it was really beautiful. It was a papaya, and inside the papaya was this frozen coconut, and then there was this red bean sort of concoction, and then something that I can only describe as snot in the middle. And so I was like, Oh my God. And so I ate around the snot, you know,
Mhm.
and I was like smiling. I was like, oh, this is delicious. This is so great. And they're like, oh, you're avoiding the thing that you need to be eating that makes people beautiful and makes their skin young and glowing and it, you know, makes you live forever. You're missing the good stuff. And I'm like, well, what is that? And they're like, oh, so no such word. No such word for it in English is what they would tell me. And I was like, uh-huh. And I'm like, is it plant or animal? And they're like, do not know, you know, like what it is. And so eventually I just went for it and ate it. And it tasted like it looked. It tasted like a bowl of snot. It was disgusting. It was really gross. And so afterwards we walked back to either work or the place where we were living. I don't remember where, but one of my coworkers says, I figured it out. I know what it's called. And I'm like, what's it called? And they're like, it's a bird's nest. And I was like, I ate a bird's nest? What are you talking about? So I go and they're like, look it up when you get back to your computer. And I look it up and sure enough, it's literally vomited up, like
Bird's nest.
regurgitated food
Yeah.
turned into a bird's nest that was boiled down.
Yeah, those are like the cave birds. They
Yeah.
have birds that are in caves and they get on really tall bamboo ladders and they climb up these caves and they take them off the cave walls.
Yeah, so it could be plant or animal. That's in the. They were correct.
So they weren't lying. It's like,
They weren't
I'm
lying.
not really sure. It comes from an animal, but it could be made of plants.
Yeah, and so the other thing that they did to me was we really like going to the arcades and playing like Dance Dance Revolution and like Guitar Hero and like all those, you know, those games. And one of them said, oh, you should have an energy drink before you go play games. And they took me by this stand that had, and for whatever reason I didn't put two and two together, there were these little grills with turtles on them. And so I thought, well, they're eating turtles. That's, you know, sad because I like turtles. And there were these little turtles on there, but I didn't put two and two together. The turtles were actually the thing that I was eating. So they had these big cauldrons of this like dark broth. And they would pour it into a cup for you and you'd take it to go like coffee. And you would drink it and you would get like ridiculously energetic afterwards. And you just want to dance revolution all night long. And eventually I figured out it was actually like some sort of Chinese herbs plus turtle innards. So yeah, I've had turtle soup.
Well,
it was really good. I'm just going to tell you.
Yeah.
Like I actually felt guilty because I was craving it and I was like, I really want more of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, down in Louisiana, they have turtle soup. It comes from alligator snapping turtles. So like the big gnarly dinosaur looking ones. But then they also mix in like a little bit of sherry. So it's a little more civilized.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
It's not on the street.
Yeah.
You just have to go to a restaurant for it. But they're not from the wild, so you don't feel bad about it. They raise them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where these turtles came from, if they were wild, free-range turtles,
or
if they were farmed. Oh, man.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a weird thing that we have in culture, too, is what we consider food and what we consider, like, ethical or free range or whatever. So I'm from Arkansas. I like to hunt. I was raised hunting, fish, all of that stuff. Trapping out here is like a mortal sin. It's like you can't do it, even though the state like was supported by trapping and everything. Kind of wiped out the grizzly bears, but whatever. But when you think about it, is hunting worse than free range cattle or whatever? Because they're thinking of free range as being some sort of ethical or nice way to raise livestock.
It's the same.
But it's the same
thing. As a matter of fact, I would say that hunting is probably way more ethical.
Yeah.
Because the animal was living its existence in the true wild. Free range is not borderless. So free range just means that they can wander around a pasture and they're not cooped up.
Yeah.
But a deer isn't cooped up. You know,
Yeah.
it's the definition of free range.
Well, and that's like, you spent plenty of time in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Hunting is part of the culture.
Yes.
That's what you're raised to do. Since you're like this tall little kid.
This tall, he pointed to is
like
like
3 feet.
3 feet tall. Baby Yoda size.
Baby Yoda hunting.
You're born a Baby Yoda with a gun.
We were raised with Mando.
Yes.
Mando took us out into the wild.
Yes.
So then you come out here to California and Oh, so where we're from, a lot of the poor population actually subsidize their health and living and feeds their family with hunting. In Arkansas, it's like $20 for a hunting license. You can kill 6 deer a year. And then you come out here to California and you can't hunt. So it's just very
Right.
bizarre to me.
And then we have lots of car accidents because deer jump in the road and they are overpopulated and they have no natural predator other than maybe the mountain lion.
The mountain lion, yeah.
But yeah, hunting was a huge deal in my family. My grandpa, and you're going to hear me talk about my grandpa a lot because, you know, I am working on a book, which we'll talk more in depth about some of my early life. But my grandfather, I lived with him for about a year and a half, but he was a person in my life that actually was consistent and was a father figure. And so I probably would have benefited greatly from living with him as a child, but I didn't. And so, but I looked up to him a lot. My grandfather he would fish. And he almost every photograph of me as a kid with my grandpa involves holding a fish. Like, it's really funny, like how many pictures of fish we have. And it's all catfish. Like, he was crazy about catfish. So we had deep freezers filled with catfish. We were always like going to someone's house and delivering catfish, trading catfish for other things. And then he also caught deer. So we would have venison chili, and we would have freezers full of venison as well. And a lot of times he would trade this stuff for cows. So it was really interesting because other like farmers would have cows or pigs, and we would do meat trading. And so a lot of what we ate was not at all bought at stores. It was bought, if we did buy anything, it was like sugar, maybe flour, you know, things like that. But the rest of it was all things that we either grew or traded or caught.
Gathered from the wild, yeah.
Or gathered from the wild.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of the culture. And that's one thing that I think is kind of unfortunate in places like California, to where people are so removed from nature that they don't really understand where their food comes from. And they don't have a connection with nature, to be honest.
This is why when they see a graphic picture of an animal being slaughtered, they freak out.
Yeah.
Where, you know, even in China, when I was working in Hong Kong, even that was confronting to me, someone who comes from a hunting, fishing family. People in China definitely know where their food comes from.
Yeah.
Like, it's hanging right in front of you, right before you eat it. You know, they know. So a lot of the restaurants you go to there will have like various birds and animals hanging in the window. I saw like an animal being slaughtered in the street and sold in pieces to people standing in line with, you know, newspaper to put it in. But here today, that wouldn't fly. Like, people would freak out if they saw that. And I don't know if you remember, but grocery stores used to have carcasses of cows hanging in the butcher area, and you could see like the cow. And now it's like you're completely removed from that process, and all you get is this perfectly little packaged, cellophane wrapped ground hamburger, and then you don't have to think about it where it comes from. But
yeah, I mean, even at the grocery stores in Arkansas, when I was younger, for the most part, I think the way that they've done things have changed. But yeah, I remember seeing like half cuts of like cows hanging up, and then they would make their cuts, and then they would package their own stuff. Now I think that they probably get like certain sections of cows like put in vacuum bags, and then they cut it up from there. So I don't think they're like hanging stuff anymore. So it's even the way that you think of a butcher as handling stuff, they're not even processing as much as they used to.
That's interesting. Well, we will have vat-grown meat, so people will feel better about their meat at some point. And it'll all be just grown in a lab. For those missing out here, Lee is shaking his head wildly in disbelief.
Again, you go from society talking about how bad processed foods are, and then the first thing they do, they're like, oh, this is amazing. We have a laboratory-created piece of food. It's like, you can't be more processed than that.
But GMOs are bad.
Yeah, GMOs are bad.
GMOs are way bad.
Corn that is like 30% bigger, terrible. But lab-grown meat, it's wonderful.
Yes, exactly. The hypocrisy.
It's ridiculous.
Oh man.
Oh, and talking about that, it's not convinced me to stop drinking their milk, but it has made me a little annoyed. So I've become a really big fan of coming out here and trying out Strauss milk. This is just amazing. But in my fanboy venture, I did go to the website and I looked, and apparently they're like all about no GMO.
Well, you know, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's a marketplace, right?
It is.
And they choose to brand themselves and market themselves as having no GMOs.
Well, that's fine, but I'm saying like the people that run the company are actively like trying to petition for laws to like ban GMO.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not good.
That's a little different.
That's a little different.
Now, if they choose to do that, that's fine. But going out there and saying that we have no place for GMO in the world is a problem, because half the world would die without GMO.
Right.
Just from sheer starvation.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's the lobbying in their own self-interest. Probably not the best thing. But if you're using it as a marketing thing and you want to advertise that you are GMO free, then that's obviously something that morally and ethically I would agree with.
Yeah.
But trying to change laws, that's not good. We can get into that another day. I think people might. There's a lot of people who wonder why I'm libertarian. That could be a whole segment on its own. Mm-hmm. Because I get told all the time, which is like, how could you possibly be libertarian? You're way too nice. Like,
what do they think a libertarian is?
They think we're like mean. Like mean people.
It's like, how dare you? You don't care about humans.
Yeah. Like,
you just want people to die in the cold winter.
Yeah. The things that they conjure up about libertarians, I would love to get rid of some of those misconceptions. Mm-hmm. I think that libertarians have a bad marketing problem. And we can get into that another day. Let's pencil that for another day. It's like, why is Cyan libertarian? And what can the libertarians do to spread more of our message to where people don't think that we just like, you know, I literally had a woman one time chase after me, screaming at me, saying that I killed homeless people or something. She was just like, you know, you step on homeless people, you kill homeless people. And I'm like, no, I do not. I do not know what you're talking about. And it was because of my political beliefs. And so, you know, that'll be a whole fun topic, I think, to go through. What else should we cover today? I guess I would love to know what people, if anyone actually listened this far, dude, awesome. I would love to know like what people think I should talk about. Like, what do you want to hear? Like, we're just kind of rambling right now and talking about whatever, but like, what do you want to know about? And do you have any specific questions? Because I'm an open book. I can talk about anything.
Well, one of the things I want to know is, so talking about your grandparents, you used to spend summers at your grandparents'?
Yeah.
But then later you just lived with them?
Yeah. So my mother was a school teacher. She still is, actually. And so during the winter break, so we had spring break, winter break, and summer break. And then if anybody went to school, they probably remember those breaks. But and so what she would do is she would immediately go and drop us off with the grandparents and get rid of us. And so
across the country?
No, actually it was my grandparents taught nearby. And so they taught on the Navajo reservation as well. And so what they would do is pile us in a car and we would drive to Oklahoma from Arizona. And
because they had like family property there that they would visit themselves?
Yeah. So they had their own property or family. And so my grandfather, he grew up very, very poor. So did my grandmother. And he started out as a sharecropper. And so, and he also picked spinach and cotton and various other plants, and basically saved up enough money to at some point buy a tractor in his own land, and started accumulating land, and then eventually, you know, got this teaching job, and he would go to Arizona, and then while he was teaching, what he would do is he had sharecroppers on his land. And sharecropping is interesting because like that's something that has this negative connotation to it, but I didn't see it that way as a kid, because like for me it was like my grandfather, that's how he got his start in life,
Mm-hmm.
because he couldn't afford land. So he farmed on other people's land. And so one of the reasons why you have people do that is so that the land is still usable and for security. So if you have people looking after your land and using the land, then you can leave it for long periods. So that's why he could be a teacher in Arizona and come back during the summer. And then when we would come back during the summer, we had watermelons and all sorts of like awesome produce that was started in the spring when he couldn't plant, because people that were cultivating the land would cultivate the land for us. And then they would go and sell their stuff at market and things like that.
So he started as a sharecropper working on someone else's property. Then he got to the point to buy his own stuff, and then he, in turn, was a sharecropper,
Correct,
a landowner, and had sharecroppers on his place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and he did that because, one, he wanted other farmers to have the same experience that he had, and so he had a variety of different farmers who sharecropped on his land. And the other reason was that we really needed people to look after the land. So you can't leave land just sort of willy-nilly. It gets overgrown. You know, we need
goes
people
fallow.
to... Yeah, what does that mean? Fallow. Never heard that word.
Well, in farm country where I grew up, having a crop go fallow basically means to be overgrown and you don't plant anything. Okay. So it's disused.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work, as you know. You have to till the land and mow it and all sorts of stuff. And if you don't take care of it, it just, it's just more work you're going to have to do later. To turn it back over, yeah. Yeah, and so we had orchards and fishing land and all sorts of stuff, and he just let people take whatever they wanted, which was fantastic because people loved to work for him and with him, because they could live off the land the whole year. And so he had people who both worked for him and sharecropped. So he had some people that would do things for him, but yeah, so we would go out and every summer and every break, and then during the summer he would put me to work. So I had to dig post holes for potatoes.
Isn't that fun? Yeah,
it was.
I had to do barbed wire fences and stuff growing up.
Yeah. So we worked all summer long, and we farmed. So I would shell pecans. I would, shell black eyed peas. I would can all summer long. And when we were done canning, we would put all that stuff in the car and then drive back to Arizona, and that's what we lived off of.
That was like your winter store.
Yeah, that was our whole winter store. So the whole trunk of the car or truck or trailer or whatever we had would be filled with canned goods that we made ourselves.
Yeah, my grandparents did the same thing. So even though they worked constantly, they still always had a garden. And when we were growing up, we put a garden in the back of our house too. So they were working both gardens. So they would come home from work. My grandfather was a master mechanic, and they were working. So my summer, again, just like yours, was doing the same thing. I would sit there and split peas.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Your fingers would hurt.
No. The worst is okra.
Oh, yeah.
I hate okra.
I love okra.
I hate it.
I love it.
It's okay a little bit in some gumbo or something, but when you're actually having to harvest it, and then it's the worst because it feels like little fiberglass hairs stuck in your fingers. It's the worst.
It is pretty bad. Black eyed peas are pretty bad too because your fingers turn kind of purple. Yeah. And I would basically pull the quicks back from my fingers doing shelling the peas, and it hurt. Cracking nuts too. Also, it all hurts. Farming hurts. There's no other way to put it. But I do miss having pecan trees around though. They are pretty amazing. If you have a pecan tree in your front yard, you can make so many things out of it. Pecan butter, whatever. You just have tons of, just from one tree you have more pecans than you can eat. So many pecan trees. Yeah. The other thing that I spent a lot of time doing was washing clothes. So my grandmother was really into having clean clothes. And starch everything to where it's like cardboard. It was. Yeah. And so basically super creased. So we would wash clothes, and I almost guarantee that nobody listening to this has ever done this. But we used to have an agitator, and you would wash the clothes in the agitator and you would wring it out with a roller. Oh, nice. So true old school. True old school. So I had to sit there and roll my clothes through to squeeze the water out of it. And then on the other side, you'd pull it out, shake it, and then you'd go put it on the line and wind dry it. We weren't allowed to use the dryer. We had a dryer, but we weren't allowed to use it unless it was an emergency.
Or
And
if it was like freezing outside.
it was freezing
maybe.
outside. And mostly we could use it for like a blanket. So that's an emergency, which is you need to have a blanket on you when you sleep at night. So we were allowed to dry those. But everything else we were not allowed to dry. My grandpa would turn the hot water tank on and off throughout the day.
So if you wanted to get a shower, you had to make sure it was turned on, or you were
30 minutes beforehand.
frozen.
30 to 45 minutes beforehand, you would go in and turn it on. And then you could take your shower, and you had to remember to turn it off afterwards. We washed all of our clothes in cold water. Like every penny that he could possibly save, he tried to save it.
Yeah.
So it was always really interesting.
Yeah, I don't think my grandparents grew up at the same time, so they were all sharecroppers. So mine were kind of split. One set of grandparents came from the mountains in the western part of Arkansas, and then down in the delta of eastern Arkansas. And so they pretty much just grew up pure dirt poor. They didn't own land. Their parents were had gone to world wars and were alcoholics, and just a really, really rough life.
Yeah.
So same sort of thing. In Arkansas, every year they had a garden, and so they just lived off of stuff that they canned just throughout the year.
Yeah, my grandmother and grandfather both lived really rough lives, and but they were always so grateful for everything, and they were very self-sufficient, self-reliant, and wonderful people in many regards. They were flawed because a lot of people from that era had some flawed thinking. They were. I wouldn't say my grandmother was, but my grandfather was definitely racist.
Mm-hmm.
And, and he held some very messed up ideas about the world. But I think with time and education and exposure, I think exposure being the biggest word that is important here, he started coming around to not having those kinds of thoughts. But I think when you were from a certain era and you were sheltered from the world and sort of insulated from everything, and the only way that you found out about things was one newspaper and a radio show and your neighbor. Mm-hmm. Of course you're fearful of everything. But later on in life, my grandfather started becoming way more open-minded and understanding of kind of how the world worked. But when I was younger, that was not the case.
Yeah, I think my grandparents, they didn't have time to be racist. So, like I said, they grew up sharecroppers.
Ain't got time for that.
I was like, I don't have time to be racist. I'm just trying to eat and feed my family. So
somehow my granddad had time.
It's that's too much. So I remember them telling me they were like, yeah, we picked cotton with black people too. We were all the same. We were all poor. That's how we identify. We were just all poor. We weren't better than anybody. Yeah. So that was kind of their view.
Unfortunately, my grandfather did not take away that message. That would have been nice if he had, but he basically just felt that people who were like one another, whether it be class, race, whatever, should stick to each other. Mm. And I think that once he became quote unquote successful and got a college degree and became a teacher, he became more elitist and more racist with time. Mm. And which was really strange because he taught on the Navajo reservation and he taught Native American children. Mm. But the whole time he was deeply uncomfortable with his profession and where he was. And he was deeply, this is again a whole other podcast topic. You should write this one down. Okay. How I was Native American for a short period of time and then wasn't. But yeah, no, my grandmother identified as Native American, and he thought that she was Native American, and I mean everybody in my family thought they were Native American. 23andMe basically proved that that's incorrect. But my grandfather would make my grandma wear a wig and cover up her Native American features. Because he was so deeply uncomfortable with it.
So your grandpa chose to work on a reservation, but then it was uncomfortable working in that environment?
Yes, he was very uncomfortable with it. He was worried that my mother would marry a Native man And he was also concerned that his grandchildren would marry and have children with Native people. And he made that very well known. Like, he was very vocal about it. And my mother, of course, was incredibly rebellious and did all of the things he feared. So that she would run off with whoever she felt like, and good for her. But yeah, my grandpa would answer the door with a gun for anybody who came knocking at the door.
That's just normal.
Is that just normal? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. What are you doing out here? But he was also afraid that, like, one of our Native American neighbors might be coming over, and he would say stuff about them. And I just remember thinking as a little kid, like, I didn't really quite understand, like, why he was that way and why he would talk that way, especially given that our family supposedly was part Native American. But yeah, anyway, he came around in the end. He was deeply apologetic for some of his beliefs, and part of it was just I had to send him magazines and articles of current scientific findings and things like that, and he would eventually come around. So
yeah, it's just interesting that he would. I mean, and it's not just interesting; it's also like bad for, I don't know, psychologically, thinking about what your grandma was going through, like having to wear a wig, wearing a wig to try to pretend that she's not somebody she is.
Yeah, it had to have been horrible. So my grandmother had this amazingly beautiful black hair, and at some point it had gotten so long, like she would take her wig off at night, and then she would let me brush her hair, and her hair was way past her butt, and it was just this beautiful jet black hair. And because she had jet black hair, I kind of assumed that the stories I heard about her being Native American were true.
Yeah.
And it fit the whole story, and then when she was younger, he made her, and yes, you could make somebody back in the day. Nobody makes me do anything, but he made her dye her hair blonde. So she dyed it blonde. So all of the early pictures of her blonde hair, and she really didn't like it. And so that's how she also came up with the idea, as well as he did, of the wigs. So she wore wigs the rest of her life for like 40 years because she was tired of dyeing her hair blonde. But yeah, it must have been horrible to have that kind of shame.
I mean, she could have just been Irish. I mean, Irish people have jet black hair sometimes too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So it's
kind of odd that he just zeroed in and said, "Oh, black hair, you have to be Indian."
Yeah. I also don't know why she allowed it, but I guess times are different back then, and there was a lot of weird power dynamics in old-fashioned relationships.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't have that. Well, I don't know. Mine was a little different. Like, so my grandma was kind of the one that controlled the relationship. It was like the opposite. Just because my grandfather's like young bad behavior, so she kind of took the reins.
Oh yeah, this was not our situation. So my grandfather was really very large and physically very like strong and very dominant personality, and very controlling. And so he was controlling financially. He was controlling in every way you can imagine. And it sounds like a horrible, horrible person when I describe him, but there were so many things that were actually very lovely about my granddad.
But you also had to think about these generationally, or even in the context of the time. Yeah. Anybody can seem to be really, really terrible or mean or like a troglodyte, but you have to take in context of when they came from and how they were raised.
Yes, absolutely.
Because, like it or not, people are a product of their environment. So things rub off.
Yeah, my grandpa, I definitely loved him dearly, looked up to him, and feared him, but also despised him. And so all of those things were true at the same time. So I remember one time when I lived with him when I was in high school, in like 1 year of junior high, and I'd gone to study with a friend of mine from school who was Native American. And I went to go to the library, and we were sitting across a table like this, the same distance that you and I are right now. And we were just like looking at books, and my grandpa came in and he like dug his hands into my shoulders and just picked me up from the table and then took me out to the car and then pushed me into the car and started making all these accusations that were not even true, that I was playing footsie with my friend. And he's like, I saw you playing footsie with him.
Oh, not footsie.
Oh no, not footsie. And he started like saying all this horrible stuff about my friend. And on the way home, I said, you don't have to be such an asshole. And oh man,
wow,
he smacked me.
Yeah,
he took his, like, he was driving and he took his whole fist and he just like backhanded me. And I learned pretty quickly like not to cross him, and that's a whole other story. But I ended up like going to the hospital and from being backhanded by my granddad. Oh. And the police officer came in and talked to me and basically told me that I was lucky that I wasn't killed. Because he's like, as far as I'm concerned, your granddad could kill you for that and I wouldn't care. And that's when I realized, I was like, oh shit.
Like, I'm in Oklahoma.
I'm in Oklahoma and I am screwed.
Like, I'm going to have to, be less of a hellion.
Yeah. So I was not a hellion with my granddad. It was a very bad idea to be a hellion with him. But, after that, I was not allowed to hang out with any guys of any kind anywhere. And so, but he thought that we were going to run off and have children together, and we were just studying. And that was like a huge glimpse into like just like how racist he was. Like, and there are other stories like that too. But, and then later on, we'll talk about sort of, I lived on the streets and I was homeless for a period of time, and I could have gone and lived with my granddad. But I really didn't want that sort of life. I really did not want to be under his thumb all the time and to have him choose who I didn't, who I hung out with and who I didn't hang out with.
Or just be like in the middle of nowhere and not really be sure if you're going to have a future that you wanted.
Yeah. And I was just
get stuck somewhere.
I was deeply uncomfortable with his beliefs as well. But yeah, I did not want to live in the middle of rural Oklahoma, with my racist granddad.
Which Oklahoma's fine.
Yes.
I grew up right next to Oklahoma. But yeah, it's a bit different.
And not everybody there is like him.
Yeah.
He was definitely one of a kind. Maybe there's other people like him, but
I'm pretty sure there's plenty like him.
Okay.
I'm from Arkansas, and generally people are super awesome and generous and nice, but there are bad people too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just what it is.
It's complex because was he bad? He had bad ideas and bad thoughts.
There were some bad aspects.
There were definitely bad aspects to him.
Yeah. But generally, I mean, maybe he was doing things because he wanted the best for you or wanted to protect you.
So most certainly he did.
So like sometimes people behave very oddly when they're trying to, in their mind, protect people.
Yeah.
From what they think is a threat.
Yeah, I don't know. I really feel like had he had more time and he'd been exposed to the internet, that he would have changed. Because, like I said, I started mailing him articles and things like that, and he started realizing the flaws of his thinking. And we became close like right before he died, which was really sad. So I think that, people are capable of changing what they believe when presented with evidence. It's kind of like gay rights, for example. Like a lot of people thought all sorts of horrendous things about gay people until they knew a gay person in their life. And that's kind of and they loved a gay person in their life. And I think that's kind of what my grandfather needed to experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even talking about that coming from Arkansas, I was surrounded by people that were anti-gay. But then there was this one guy in my life since I was a kid that had always been there. And he showed nothing but love for everyone around him. His name was Tommy. And he was my grandma and my mom's hairstylist. And it's probably one of the reasons I got into Star Wars too, like bringing us back down to Baby Yoda. So when they would go get their hair done, I would go in and he had one of these R2-D2 like toy boxes. It was like a replica size of R2D2 with like just all sorts of toys for kids to play with. So I loved like that R2D2 toy box and kind of wanted one. But when I was getting older, my dad, for some reason, was like really anti-gay. I think because he felt probably threatened by them because he had had people like hit on him in the past, and I think he might have had some sort of complex from it. But I got to the point to where I'm like, I can't be against people like Tommy, because why can't they have the things or have relationships that everyone else wants?
Yeah,
because all they do is care about people.
Here's the interesting thing.
They've only ever been nice to me, so I can't be against them.
My grandfather never once spoke ill of any gay person ever. So that's one interesting thing. Like, him and my grandmother would say things like, well, he's like that, quote unquote. But that's all they would say is he's like that or she's like that. But no, he never said anything ever that was disparaging about gay people ever. Which is interesting given all the other things that he said about Native Americans and Black people. But yeah, never disparaging against gay people at all.
Did he have any relatives that were gay?
I don't know.
Maybe that might have.
Yeah, I don't know. Nobody that was openly out, so it's possible. He did serve in the military, so maybe he encountered somebody in the military. But I think that he just felt very non-threatened in that regard, or just didn't, and it just never came up. So
do you think that since you spent a decent amount of time around your grandparents, did your sense of like ethics and morals probably come from them? Or absolutely
So I think so. My mother was born in the early 50s, and so she was one of those rebellious, free-loving 60s people that ran off with the hippies, and she was all about free love and drugs. And my grandparents are from the silent generation, and the things that I got from them that I didn't realize until later in life that I'd gotten from them was this very radical self-reliance. And my mother was the opposite of that. My mother would always look for whatever social welfare program she could get on, whatever free ride she could get, scholarships for this and that, and, grants and whatever. If there was any sort of thing going on where you could get money for something, my mother had it dialed in. And I really felt that was wrong. And part of it was because I saw my grandparents struggle when they were younger. And I saw them, get on their feet and then have property and then have the money to retire and to be able to take care of themselves. And I admired that about them. I admired that they, never asked anybody for anything. And so when I was younger, I was determined to never ask them for anything. And it was definitely a driving factor in my life because I wanted to someday really make my grandfather proud and show up and just say, like, look, I did all of this without you and without anyone. And it was such a huge driving force for me. So I looked up to them so much. And my grandmother was a really good seamstress. She could make and sew anything. She could cook anything. She was a home economics teacher and a wonderful mother and grandmother. Like, if there was like sort of this picturesque, like perfect grandmother, my grandmother was that person.
She was like the Norman Rockwell, grandma.
She was perfect in every way. And the only thing that I guess wasn't perfect about her was that she lied to herself and others about how she really felt. And so like, if something was going wrong or if there was an argument happening, she would show up and she'd be like, well, everybody, how about some pie? You know what would be really good right now? Some pie. And that's how she sounds, like her voice. She's like, apple pie, chocolate pie. She's like, what kind of pie would you like? And
because that'll make everything better.
Doesn't make everything better.
It's like, it's a little unpleasant, but what will make things more pleasant? Pie.
So she was always pushing her pie on everybody. And it was so soothing and very sweet. But like anytime anyone was having a disagreement or anything, she'd say, "Well, my, how about some cookies? How about some pie?" You know, she'd go start serving people food.
Try to use it as a distraction to break it up.
Yeah, and then after my grandfather died, it was really interesting because she finally confessed how much she hated cooking, and just did it because she had to.
She taught it. She taught it in school though.
Yeah, and no more pies after Grandpa died. After Grandpa died, she was just like, "Go to the store and buy a pie. It's just as good as mine." And I'm like, "No, it's not." I'm like, "Nothing's as good as your pie."
You want some cookies? Great. They have a whole box of them in the store.
Go get yourself some damn cookies. I'm over it. Yeah, when she was by herself in the end, she was definitely just over it. She was just like, "Nah, I'm not doing any of this stuff. You do it your darn self."
Wow.
Yeah, so it was definitely more of a Martha Stewart putting on a show.
She's like, "My contract's over."
Yeah, it's up.
It's like I'm on me time.
Yeah, exactly. I don't blame her really, though. I mean, again, she came from a different era where you put on a show, and you looked like the perfect.
Because like the wife was the glue, right? She was her job was to hold everything together and
make
just
perfect Jello molds.
Yeah,
you make perfect Jello molds.
And have dinner ready at 5 when you get home.
Lemon meringue pie that didn't weep. That was a big deal. Her pie did not weep.
And it had just like perfect toasted little peaks on them.
Yeah, perfect. They were absolutely perfect. Like they came straight out of like Better Homes and Gardens. My grandmother had all of that.
Do you have her cookbooks?
I do. I have a lot of her handwritten cookbooks. And I need to digitize them because I would really like to share them with everybody.
There you go.
You know, but I want to try making it first and then, you know.
Well, what you could do is you can make it and then you could come into the podcast and talk about what you made and what everyone else should do.
People can listen to us masticate.
Yeah.
For those people that have misophonia, they're going to be so upset.
Just purposely smacking the microphone. This is so moist.
Ew! That's my least favorite word. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hate that word.
I say it on purpose because for some reason it became a thing to where people somehow hated the word.
I'm one of those people, Lee. I'm one of those people.
Why?
I freak out when people say that word. Anyway, so I don't know what it is. So I am one of these people that like has a visual. I'm very visual and I think in pictures. And so when you say that word, I don't know what it is, but I immediately think of like the bottom of a refrigerator, like a dank, moist place. I don't think of chocolate cake. A lot of people are just like, "Don't you think of chocolate cake?" Like I associate moist with goodness, and I'm like, no, I associate moist with mold and like mildew and disgusting stuff.
Did
like,
you have a traumatic experience with a moldy refrigerator?
Oh, I really don't know.
Because like that's not what would come to mind for me at all.
Yeah, no, that's what comes immediately to mind for me. And then I also don't like the word I shouldn't tell you all the words I hate because you know you're just going to use them, aren't you? Crevice. I hate the word crevice and moist crevice. Particularly bad.
What about a crevasse?
A crevasse. No, that's fine.
That's okay.
Yeah,
because if you crevice. So a crevasse is a larger crevice.
Okay,
so as long as you talk it in a different scale, it's okay.
It sounds really like pretentious, but it doesn't annoy me.
Okay.
But no, moist crevices. And I also don't like the word bespoke.
You don't like bespoke?
No, bespoke.
Like it's custom made.
Yeah. Whenever anybody puts that in like a brochure, they're like, "We have a plane with bespoke."
Just trying to be
fixtures.
pretentious.
And I'm like, "You're just pretentious." Like, whatever. Nobody uses that word. Really, like, whatever.
I've only ever seen it in articles written up about some shop that somebody makes like custom suits or something.
Yeah, people who buy Rolls Royces, they're bespoke.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. I ain't got time for that.
Go get your own bespoke.
Yeah, bespoke yourself. No, I really hate that word. It drives me batty. I hate it. Absolutely hate it. So
I didn't know it was an offensive word.
It's not as bad as moist. That takes the trophy.
Moist bespoke crevices.
Oh. Okay, stop. Stop. Okay. What I'm picturing there is like a yacht, a moisty, moldy, bespoke yacht. Ew. No.
That's so funny.
I don't like moist cake either.
Like dry cake?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really like cake, but
So you like turkey?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do like.
How do you like your turkey?
Wet.
You like your turkey wet?
Juicy.
Juicy. Oh, okay.
I like juicy turkey.
Okay.
Yeah, juicy. See, juicy sounds good. Juicy turkey.
Is juicy a more fun word?
Soft cake. Juicy cake. Liquefied cake.
No, that doesn't sound good at all.
Molten cake. Right? You're with me
it's
here?
just like lava cake.
Lava cake. Yeah. These are all much better words than the other alternative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And moist is not a selling point.
What about nook, cranny? Those are fine.
Not as bad as crevice. Crevice is bad. It's just very bad. I have other words, but I'm going to stop there. I'm not telling you any more of my words.
All right. I don't know. It's almost an hour and a half.
Well, we should stop there then. I think we have plenty of stuff to go through next time.
Yeah.
And
so we got a little idea of where you came from and how you spent your time growing up, even in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah, by the way, there's a tiny bit of an echo in here in our studio, but it will go away.
It will go away.
With time, the podcast quality will go up.
We have a lot of hardwood in here and some empty corners, so we're going to try to get those filled up.
And then we're recording this out of the Hamilton studio. Which will also be the home of several other podcasts, which we will tell you about as they come up. But we have, we're toying with the idea of calling it Libertania.
Libertania podcast.
Libertania, This Week in Libertania, or Libertania Today, or Libertania Podcast.
I think it'll just be Libertania Podcast.
Yeah, Libertania
Podcast. We'll be
Podcast.
talking about human rights, freedoms, American history, the founding documents, founding fathers, etc. Current events.
And we'll have special guests on who are traveling through town who dedicate their lives to these various causes.
To human rights, civil rights.
Yep. And so stay tuned for that. That should be fun. It'll be separate than these sorts of things. This is just me rambling.
It'll be different than blah.
Yeah, blah.
Story time with Cyan Banister.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye.
We don't care. Anytime, anywhere. Plug you in on Datasphere. You out of here. No Sony, no Xbox. Your homies got less spots than we do. We feed you these packets that we bleed through. Go bleed you as your comms. Few terabytes of that strong. Through copper, through fiber, through air gaps and MacGyver. These packets relentless. They gum it up like the dentist. No access, molasses. When these bots in practice. You tied up, we fired up. So respect. You tied up, we fired up. So respect. This upstream is so brutal. The CNC stay brutal. We got packets on 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 packets. We got packets on packets on packets on packets on packets on packets. We got packets on packets on packets on packets on packets on packets. We got packets on packets on packets on packets. I got packets on packets on packets on packets. I got packets on packets on packets on packets. I got packets on packets on packets on packets.